Hello, and welcome. On quiet nights long ago, people shared stories filled with magic, trials, fear, and hope. Each tale opened a doorway into another world, where imagination shines and lessons echo across the ages. Tonight, we step into that timeless realm together. The Two Kings' Children. There was once on a time a king who had a little boy of whom it had been foretold that he should be killed by a stag when he was 16 years of age. And when he had reached that age, the huntsman once went hunting with him. In the forest, the king's son was separated from the others, and all at once he saw a great stag, which he wanted to shoot, but could not hit. At length, he chased the stag so far that they were quite out of the forest. And then, suddenly, a great tall man was standing there instead of the stag, and said, "It is well that I have thee. I have already ruined 6 pairs of glass skates with running after thee, and have not been able to get thee." Then he took the king's son with him, and dragged him through a great lake to a great palace, and then he had to sit down to table with him and eat something. When they had eaten something together, the king said, "I have 3 daughters. Thou must keep watch over the eldest for one night, from 9 in the evening till 6 in the morning. And every time the clock strikes, I will come myself and call. And if thou then givest me no answer, tomorrow morning thou shalt be put to death. But if thou always givest me an answer, thou shalt have her to wife." When the young folks went to the bedroom, there stood a stone image of Saint Christopher, and the king's daughter said to it, "My father will come at 9 o'clock, and every hour till it strikes 3. When he calls, give him an answer instead of the king's son." Then the stone image of Saint Christopher nodded its head quite quickly, and then more and more slowly, till at last it stood still. The next morning, the king said to him, "Thou hast done the business well, but I cannot give my daughter away. Thou must now watch a night by my second daughter. And then I will consider with myself whether thou canst have my eldest daughter to wife. But I shall come every hour myself, and when I call thee, answer me. And if I call thee, and thou dost not reply, thy blood shall flow." Then they both went into the sleeping room, and there stood a still larger stone image of Saint Christopher. And the king's daughter said to it, "If my father calls, do you answer him?" Then the great stone image of Saint Christopher again nodded its head quite quickly, and then more and more slowly, until at last it stood still again. And the king's son lay down on the threshold, put his hand under his head, and slept. The next morning, the king said to him, "Thou hast done the business really well, but I cannot give my daughter away. Thou must now watch a night by the youngest princess. And then I will consider with myself whether thou canst have my second daughter to wife. But I shall come every hour myself, and when I call thee, answer me. And if I call thee, and thou answerest not, thy blood shall flow for me." Then they once more went to the sleeping room together, and there was a much greater and much taller image of Saint Christopher than the two first had been. The king's daughter said to it, "When my father calls, do thou answer." Then the great tall stone image of Saint Christopher nodded quite half an hour with its head, until at length the head stood still again. And the king's son laid himself down on the threshold of the door and slept. The next morning the king said, "Thou hast indeed watched well, but I cannot give thee my daughter now. I have a great forest. If thou cuttest it down for me between 6 o'clock this morning and 6 at night, I will think about it." Then he gave him a glass axe, a glass wedge, and a glass mallet. When he got into the wood, he began at once to cut, but the axe broke in two. Then he took the wedge and struck it once with the mallet, and it became as short and as small as sand. Then he was much troubled and believed he would have to die, and sat down and wept. Now when it was noon, the king said, "One of you girls must take him something to eat." "No," said the two eldest, "we will not take it to him. The one by whom he last watched can take him something." Then the youngest was forced to go and take him something to eat. When she got into the forest, she asked him how he was getting on. "Oh," said he, "I am getting on very badly." Then she said he was to come and just eat a little. "Nay," said he, "I cannot do that. I shall still have to die, so I will eat no more." Then she spoke so kindly to him and begged him just to try, that he came and ate something. When he had eaten something, she said, "I will comb thy hair a while, and then thou wilt feel happier." So she combed his hair, and he became weary and fell asleep. And then she took her handkerchief and made a knot in it, and struck it 3 times on the earth, and said, "Earth workers, come forth." In a moment, numbers of little earth men came forth, and asked what the king's daughter commanded. Then said she, "In 3 hours' time, the great forest must be cut down, and the whole of the wood laid in heaps." So the little earthmen went about and got together the whole of their kindred to help them with the work. They began at once, and when the 3 hours were over, all was done, and they came back to the king's daughter and told her so. Then she took her white handkerchief again and said, "Earth workers, go home." On this they all disappeared. When the king's son awoke, he was delighted, and she said, "Come home when it has struck 6 o'clock." He did as she told him, and then the king asked, "Hast thou made away with the forest?" "Yes," said the king's son. When they were sitting at table, the king said, "I cannot yet give thee my daughter to wife. Thou must still do something more for her sake." So he asked what it was to be then. "I have a great fish pond," said the king. "Thou must go to it tomorrow morning and clear it of all mud until it is as bright as a mirror, and fill it with every kind of fish." The next morning, the king gave him a glass shovel and said, "The fish pond must be done by 6 o'clock." So he went away, and when he came to the fish pond, he stuck his shovel in the mud, and it broke in two. Then he stuck his hoe in the mud, and broke it also. Then he was much troubled. At noon, the youngest daughter brought him something to eat, and asked him how he was getting on. So the king's son said everything was going very ill with him, and he would certainly have to lose his head. "My tools have broken to pieces again." "Oh," said she, "thou must just come and eat something, and then thou wilt be in another frame of mind." "No," said he, "I cannot eat. I am far too unhappy for that." Then she gave him many good words, until at last he came and ate something. Then she combed his hair again, and he fell asleep. So once more she took her handkerchief, tied a knot in it, and struck the ground thrice with the knot, and said, "Earth workers, come forth." In a moment, a great many little earthmen came and asked what she desired, and she told them that in 3 hours' time they must have the fish pond entirely cleaned out, and it must be so clear that people could see themselves reflected in it, and every kind of fish must be in it. The little earthmen went away and summoned all their kindred to help them, and in 2 hours it was done. Then they returned to her and said, "We have done as thou hast commanded." The king's daughter took the handkerchief and once more struck thrice on the ground with it, and said, "Earth workers, go home again." Then they all went away. When the king's son awoke, the fish pond was done. Then the king's daughter went away also, and told him that when it was 6, he was to come to the house. When he arrived at the house, the king asked, "Hast thou got the fish pond done?" "Yes," said the king's son. "That was very good." When they were again sitting at table, the king said, "Thou hast certainly done the fish pond, but I cannot give thee my daughter yet. Thou must just do one thing more." "What is that, then?" asked the king's son. The king said he had a great mountain on which there was nothing but briars, which must all be cut down. And at the top of it, the youth must build up a great castle, which must be as strong as could be conceived, and all the furniture and fittings belonging to a castle must be inside it. And when he arose next morning, the king gave him a glass axe and a glass gimlet with him, and he was to have all done by 6 o'clock. As he was cutting down the first briar with the axe, it broke off short, and so small that the pieces flew all round about, and he could not use the gimlet either. Then he was quite miserable, and waited for his dearest to see if she would not come and help him in his need. When it was midday, she came and brought him something to eat. He went to meet her and told her all, and ate something, and let her comb his hair, and fell asleep. Then she once more took the knot and struck the earth with it, and said, "Earth workers, come forth." Then came once again numbers of earthmen, and asked what her desire was. Then said she, "In the space of 3 hours they must cut down the whole of the briars, and a castle must be built on the top of the mountain that must be as strong as anyone could conceive, and all the furniture that pertains to a castle must be inside it." They went away and summoned their kindred to help them, and when the time was come, all was ready. Then they came to the king's daughter and told her so. And the king's daughter took her handkerchief and struck thrice on the earth with it, and said, "Earth workers, go home," on which they all disappeared. When therefore the king's son awoke and saw everything done, he was as happy as a bird in air. When it had struck 6, they went home together. Then said the king, "Is the castle ready?" "Yes," said the king's son. When they sat down to table, the king said, "I cannot give away my youngest daughter until the 2 eldest are married." Then the king's son and the king's daughter were quite troubled, and the king's son had no idea what to do. But he went by night to the king's daughter and ran away with her. When they had got a little distance away, the king's daughter peeped round and saw her father behind her. "Oh," said she, "what are we to do? My father is behind us, and will take us back with him. I will at once change thee into a briar, and myself into a rose, and I will shelter myself in the midst of the bush." When the father reached the place, there stood a briar with 1 rose on it. Then he was about to gather the rose, when the thorn came and pricked his finger, so that he was forced to go home again. His wife asked why he had not brought their daughter back with him. So he said he had nearly got up to her, but that all at once he had lost sight of her, and a briar with 1 rose was growing on the spot. Then said the queen, "If thou hadst but gathered the rose, the briar would have been forced to come too." So he went back again to fetch the rose, but in the meantime the 2 were already far over the plain, and the king ran after them. Then the daughter once more looked round and saw her father coming, and said, "Oh, what shall we do now? I will instantly change thee into a church, and myself into a priest, and I will stand up in the pulpit and preach." When the king got to the place, there stood a church, and in the pulpit was a priest preaching. So he listened to the sermon, and then went home again. Then the queen asked why he had not brought their daughter with him. And he said, "Nay, I ran a long time after her, and just as I thought I should soon overtake her, a church was standing there, and a priest was in the pulpit preaching. Thou shouldst just have brought the priest," said his wife, "and then the church would soon have come. It is no use to send thee. I must go there myself." When she had walked for some time, and could see the two in the distance, the king's daughter peeped round, and saw her mother coming, and said, "Now we are undone, for my mother is coming herself. I will immediately change thee into a fish pond, and myself into a fish." When the mother came to the place, there was a large fish pond, and in the midst of it a fish was leaping about and peeping out of the water, and it was quite merry. She wanted to catch the fish, but she could not. Then she was very angry and drank up the whole pond in order to catch the fish. But it made her so ill that she was forced to vomit, and vomited the whole pond out again. Then she cried, "I see very well that nothing can be done now," and said that now they might come back to her. Then the king's daughter went back again, and the queen gave her daughter 3 walnuts, and said, "With these thou canst help thyself when thou art in thy greatest need." So the young folks went once more away together, and when they had walked quite 10 miles, they arrived at the castle from whence the king's son came, and close by it was a village. When they reached it, the king's son said, "Stay here, my dearest. I will just go to the castle, and then will I come with a carriage and with attendants to fetch thee." When he got to the castle, they all rejoiced greatly at having the king's son back again, and he told them he had a bride who was now in the village, and they must go with the carriage to fetch her. Then they harnessed the horses at once, and many attendants seated themselves outside the carriage. When the king's son was about to get in, his mother gave him a kiss, and he forgot everything which had happened, and also what he was about to do. On this, his mother ordered the horses to be taken out of the carriage again, and everyone went back into the house, but the maiden sat in the village and watched and watched, and thought he would come and fetch her. But no one came. Then the king's daughter took service in the mill, which belonged to the castle, and was obliged to sit by the pond every afternoon and clean the tubs. And the queen came one day on foot from the castle, and went walking by the pond, and saw the well-grown maiden sitting there, and said, "What a fine, strong girl that is. She pleases me well." Then she and all with her looked at the maid, but no one knew her. So a long time passed by, during which the maiden served the miller honorably and faithfully. In the meantime, the queen had sought a wife for her son, who came from quite a distant part of the world. When the bride came, they were at once to be married, and many people hurried together, all of whom wanted to see everything. Then the girl said to the miller that he might be so good as to give her leave to go also. So the miller said, "Yes, do go there." When she was about to go, she opened one of the 3 walnuts, and a beautiful dress lay inside it. She put it on and went into the church and stood by the altar. Suddenly came the bride and bridegroom and seated themselves before the altar. And when the priest was just going to bless them, the bride peeped half round and saw the maiden standing there. Then she stood up again and said she would not be given away until she also had as beautiful a dress as that lady there. So they went back to the house again and sent to ask the lady if she would sell that dress. No, she would not sell it, but the bride might perhaps earn it. Then the bride asked her how she was to do this. Then the maiden said if she might sleep one night outside the king's son's door, the bride might have what she wanted. So the bride said, yes, she was willing to do that. But the servants were ordered to give the king's son a sleeping drink. And then the maiden laid herself down on the threshold and lamented all night long. She had had the forest cut down for him. She had had the fish pond cleaned out for him. She had had the castle built for him. She had changed him into a briar, and then into a church, and at last into a fish pond. And yet he had forgotten her so quickly. The king's son did not hear one word of it, but the servants had been awakened and had listened to it and had not known what it could mean. The next morning, when they were all up, the bride put on the dress and went away to the church with the bridegroom. In the meantime, the maiden opened the second walnut, and a still more beautiful dress was inside it. She put it on and went and stood by the altar in the church, and everything happened as it had happened the time before. And the maiden again lay all night on the threshold, which led to the chamber of the king's son. And the servant was once more to give him a sleeping drink. The servant, however, went to him and gave him something to keep him awake. And then the king's son went to bed, and the miller's maiden bemoaned herself as before on the threshold of the door, and told of all that she had done. All this the king's son heard, and was sore troubled. And what was past came back to him. Then he wanted to go to her, but his mother had locked the door. The next morning, however, he went at once to his beloved, and told her everything which had happened to him, and prayed her not to be angry with him for having forgotten her. Then the king's daughter opened the third walnut, and within it was a still more magnificent dress, which she put on, and went with her bridegroom to church. And numbers of children came, who gave them flowers, and offered them gay ribbons to bind about their feet. And they were blessed by the priest, and had a merry wedding. But the false mother and the bride had to depart, and the mouth of the person who last told all this is still warm. The Cunning Little Tailor. Once upon a time, in a kingdom both prosperous and proud, there lived a princess who thought herself wiser than all men. She was beautiful beyond measure, yet her heart was haughty, and she disdained every suitor who came to her gates. For she had devised a cruel custom. Whenever a wooer presented himself, she would put forth a riddle. If he solved it, she had promised to take him as her husband. But if he failed, he was dismissed with mockery and scorn, sent away as though he were a beggar, unworthy of her glance. Many a noble knight and learned scholar had departed in shame, their hopes dashed, while the princess laughed at their folly. And so it was said throughout the land that whoever could guess the riddle of the princess would win her hand, no matter his birth or station. Now it chanced one day that 3 tailors, traveling the same road, fell in together and spoke of this strange custom. The 2 eldest were clever craftsmen, proud of their skill with needle and shears, and they boasted that if they could fashion garments so fine that kings themselves admired their work, then surely they could also unravel the riddle of a vain young princess. The third was a poor fellow, a wandering drifter who scarcely knew his trade at all. He was small of frame, with little wit to boast of, and yet he laughed and said, "I too shall try my fortune, for who knows where luck may lie? If it does not fall to me here, where else shall I seek it?" The elder too sneered at him, saying, "Stay behind, foolish one. With your paltry sense, you cannot hope to match wits with a royal maiden." But the little tailor answered cheerfully, "Once in a lifetime, a man must set his mind to something higher than himself. My head is set upon this matter, and I will not turn back." So they journeyed on, side by side, until they came to the court of the princess, and demanded that the riddle be given to them. The princess, seated in her hall, regarded them with a proud smile and said, "If your wits are so fine that they could be threaded through the eye of a needle, then answer me this. I have 2 kinds of hair upon my head. Tell me, What colors are they?" The first tailor, thinking himself very shrewd, bowed and said, "Surely it is black and white, like the pepper and salt cloth that we weave for our cloaks." But the princess shook her head and said coldly, "Wrongly guessed. Speak you next." The second tailor, not to be outdone, replied, "Then it must be brown and red, like the livery coat my father wears on feast days." But again the princess answered, "Wrongly guessed. Let the third give his answer, for I see well enough that he knows." Then the little tailor stepped forward with a bold face and clear voice. "Upon the princess's head are 2 hairs, one of silver and one of gold. These are the colors." At these words, the princess grew pale, for he had struck the truth, and she had thought no mortal man would ever uncover her secret. For a moment, she swayed, nearly overcome with fear. But then she mastered herself and said, "Not so fast, little man. You have not won me yet. There is one task more. In the stable below waits a bear, fierce and mighty, with whom you must spend the night. If you are still alive when morning comes, then I must keep my promise and be your bride." In truth, she believed she would thus rid herself of him, for no one had yet survived a night in the bear's company. But the little tailor laughed merrily. "Boldly ventured is half won," he said, and went down to the stable as if to a feast. When evening came, the bear rushed toward him with claws outstretched, ready to crush him. "Softly, softly," said the tailor, as calm as though he feared nothing at all. He drew from his pocket a handful of nuts, cracked them between his teeth, and ate them. The bear, who had never seen such a thing, longed to try as well. The tailor handed him some pebbles instead. The beast bit down with all his strength, but they would not yield. Growling in shame, the bear begged the tailor to crack them for him. The tailor scolded, "With such a great mouth, and yet thou canst not break a little nut. See how easy it is." And quick as a flash, he slipped a true nut between his teeth, cracked it open, and ate the kernel. The bear believed his eyes and begged to try again, but once more received only pebbles, and once more failed. When this game was done, the tailor drew forth a fiddle hidden beneath his coat. He played a merry tune, so sweet that even the savage bear began to sway and then to bounce upon his hind legs. The sound delighted him, and he begged, "Teach me that I too may play whenever I wish to dance." "Gladly," said the tailor, "if thou hast the talent. But first show me thy claws. They are far too long for fiddling. I must trim them." He fetched a vice, clamped the bear's paws fast, and said, "Now wait while I bring the scissors." And with that, he lay himself upon a bed of straw and fell into a sound sleep, leaving the bear to groan and struggle in vain. Through the long night, the princess heard the bear growling fiercely. She smiled to herself, believing the little tailor had already been torn to pieces. In the morning, she rose, certain she was free of him forever. But when she looked into the stable, there he stood, bright and merry as a lark, while the bear lay bound and weary. She could say no more, for before all the court she had given her word. The king himself ordered a carriage to bear them to church, there to be wed. Yet envy stirred in the hearts of the two elder tailors. They went secretly to the stable, loosed the bear from the vice, and set him free. With a roar, he rushed after the carriage. The princess, hearing his growls and seeing his shadow, shrieked, "The bear! The bear is behind us! He comes to devour thee." But the little tailor was not troubled. He sprang to his head, thrust his legs out of the window, and cried, "Dost thou see the vice? Back, or thou shalt be put in once again." The bear, remembering the torment, turned tail and fled into the forest, and never returned. Thus the little tailor rode in peace to the church, where he was married to the princess without delay, and thereafter he dwelt with her in happiness, as light-hearted as a songbird in spring. Whoever does not believe this tale must pay a thaler. The bright sun brings it to light. Once, in the days when men wandered from town to town with nothing but a needle case at their side and hope in their hearts, there was a tailor's apprentice who set out into the wide world to seek his fortune. For a long while, he went from village to village, knocking at every door, asking for work at every shop. Yet no master would take him in. His purse was empty, his stomach hollow, and he had not a single farthing left with which to buy bread. The hunger in his body grew as heavy as the hopelessness in his soul. As he trudged along a lonely road with dust on his shoes and despair in his heart, he met a Jew coming from the opposite direction. Now, the apprentice thought to himself, "This man must surely carry much money upon him, for traders and travelers always do." And in that dark moment, he thrust God from his heart and allowed wickedness to rule his hands. He seized the man, pressed him hard, and cried, "Give me thy money, or I shall strike thee down where thou standest." The Jew, trembling and pale, answered, "Have mercy upon me, young man. My life is worth more than coin. I have but 8 farthings to my name. Take them and let me go." But the apprentice, blinded by greed and rage, shouted, "Thou liest! Money thou hast, and more than 8 farthings. It shall be brought forth, or I will beat it out of thee." And he fell upon the man with cruel blows until his strength was gone and his life almost fled. At the very edge of death, with his last breath, the Jew lifted his eyes toward the heavens and spoke, "The bright sun will bring it to light." Then his head sank back and his spirit departed. The apprentice searched the poor man's pockets, turned them inside out, and found nothing but the 8 farthings that had been spoken of. No gold, no silver, no hidden treasure, only the small coins that clinked miserably in his hand. Ashamed, though not repentant, he dragged the lifeless body behind a thicket of trees where none might easily see, and continued upon his way as though nothing had happened. He wandered long thereafter, and at last came to a town where a master tailor took him in. He worked diligently, and fortune seemed to smile again upon him. The master had a fair daughter, gentle and modest, and the apprentice, forgetting his dark deed, fell deeply in love with her. In time, he won her heart, and after her father's blessing, they were wed. Their days together were bright. Their table never lacked bread, and they lived in harmony and joy. 2 children were born to them, and the little house rang with laughter. But the years, which cover many things with dust, do not always bury what is evil. One day, the wife's parents died, and the young couple were left alone to keep their own household. On a morning bright with sunlight, the husband sat by the window while his wife brought him his coffee. He poured it into the saucer to cool, and as he raised it to his lips, the rays of the sun struck the liquid so that it gleamed upon the wall and made shining rings that danced and quivered. The tailor's apprentice looked at the light, and a shadow passed across his face. He muttered under his breath, "Yes, it would dearly like to bring it to light, and yet it cannot." His wife, startled, asked, "Dear husband, what meanest thou by these words? What is it that the sun would bring to light?" He answered quickly, "That I may not tell thee." But the wife pressed him with tender words and with tears. "If thou lovest me, thou must hide nothing from me. Thy secret shall rest safely in my heart, and never shall another soul know it. Speak, and ease thy burden." Long he resisted, but her entreaties gave him no peace, and at last, weary of her pleading, he told her all, how in the days of his wandering, penniless and starving, he had fallen upon a Jew, beaten him near to death, and taken from him his last farthings. How, in the hour of dying, the Jew had spoken, "The bright sun will bring it to light." And now, when the rays had gleamed upon the wall, he thought the sun had indeed tried to reveal the hidden deed, but could not. The wife, shuddering, swore she would never tell a soul, for else her husband's life would be forfeit. But the heart of a woman is oft too full to hold such weighty secrets. That very day, she ran to her closest friend and whispered the tale, binding her with oaths never to repeat it. Yet within 2 days, like fire that leaps from one thatch roof to another, the story spread through the whole town. The magistrates heard of it, the guards were sent, and the tailor was seized and brought before the court. There he was tried, and the truth stood plain before all men. Condemned for his crime, he was led away to his punishment. And so, though many years had passed, the words of the dying man proved true. The bright sun did indeed bring it to light. The blue light. There was once, on a time, a soldier who for many years had served the king faithfully, but when the war came to an end, could serve no longer because of the many wounds which he had received. The king said to him, "Thou mayst return to thy home. I need thee no longer, and thou wilt not receive any more money, for he only receives wages who renders me service for them." Then the soldier did not know how to earn a living, went away greatly troubled, and walked the whole day, until in the evening he entered a forest. When darkness came on, he saw a light, which he went up to, and came to a house wherein lived a witch. "Do give me one night's lodging, and a little to eat and drink," said he to her, "or I shall starve." "Oh," she answered, "who gives anything to a runaway soldier? Yet will I be compassionate and take you in if you will do what I wish." "What do you wish?" said the soldier. "That you should dig all round my garden for me tomorrow." The soldier consented, and next day labored with all his strength, but could not finish it by the evening. "I see well enough," said the witch, "that you can do no more today, but I will keep you yet another night, in payment for which you must tomorrow chop me a load of wood and make it small." The soldier spent the whole day in doing it, and in the evening the witch proposed that he should stay one night more. "Tomorrow you shall only do me a very trifling piece of work. Behind my house there is an old dry well, into which my light has fallen. It burns blue and never goes out, and you shall bring it up again for me." Next day, the old woman took him to the well and let him down in a basket. He found the blue light and made her a signal to draw him up again. She did draw him up, But when he came near the edge, she stretched down her hand and wanted to take the blue light away from him. "No," said he, perceiving her evil intention. "I will not give thee the light until I am standing with both feet upon the ground." The witch fell into a passion, let him down again into the well, and went away. The poor soldier fell without injury on the moist ground, and the blue light went on burning. But of what use was that to him? He saw very well that he could not escape death. He sat for a while, very sorrowfully. Then suddenly he felt in his pocket and found his tobacco pipe, which was still half full. "This shall be my last pleasure," thought he, pulled it out, lit it at the blue light, and began to smoke. When the smoke had circled about the cavern, suddenly a little black dwarf stood before him and said, "Lord, what are thy commands?" "What commands have I to give thee?" replied the soldier, quite astonished. "I must do everything thou biddest me," said the little man. "Good," said the soldier. "Then in the first place, help me out of this well." The little man took him by the hand and led him through an underground passage, but he did not forget to take the blue light with him. On the way, the dwarf showed him the treasures which the witch had collected and hidden there, and the soldier took as much gold as he could carry. When he was above, he said to the little man, "Now go and bind the old witch and carry her before the judge." In a short time, she with frightful cries came riding by, as swift as the wind on a wild tomcat. Nor was it long after that before the little man reappeared. "It is all done," said he, "and the witch is already hanging on the gallows." "What further commands has my lord?" inquired the dwarf. "At this moment, none," answered the soldier. "Thou canst return home. Only be at hand immediately if I summon thee. Nothing more is needed than that thou shouldest light thy pipe at the blue light, and I will appear before thee at once." Thereupon he vanished from his sight. The soldier returned to the town from which he had come. He went to the best inn, ordered himself handsome clothes, and then bade the landlord furnish him a room as handsomely as possible. When it was ready, and the soldier had taken possession of it, he summoned the little black mannequin and said, "I have served the king faithfully, but he has dismissed me and left me to hunger, and now I want to take my revenge. What am I to do?" asked the little man. "Late at night, when the king's daughter is in bed, bring her here in her sleep. She shall do servant's work for me." The mannequin said, "That is an easy thing for me to do, but a very dangerous thing for you. For if it is discovered, you will fare ill." When 12 o'clock had struck, the door sprang open, and the mannequin carried in the princess. "Aha! Art thou there?" cried the soldier. "Get to thy work at once. Fetch the broom and sweep the chamber." So, when she had done this, he ordered her to come to his chair. And then he stretched out his feet and said, "Pull off my boots for me." And then he threw them in her face and made her pick them up again and clean and brighten them. She, however, did everything he bade her, without opposition, silently, and with half-shut eyes. When the first cock crowed, the mannequin carried her back to the royal palace and laid her in her bed. Next morning, when the princess arose, she went to her father and told him that she had had a very strange dream. "I was carried through the streets with the rapidity of lightning," said she, "and taken into a soldier's room. And I had to wait upon him like a servant, sweep his room, clean his boots, and do all kinds of menial work. It was only a dream, and yet I am just as tired as if I really had done everything." "The dream may have been true," said the king. "I will give thee a piece of advice. Fill thy pocket full of peas and make a small hole in it. And then, if thou art carried away again, they will fall out and leave a track in the streets." But unseen by the king, the mannequin was standing beside him when he said that, and heard all. At night, when the sleeping princess was again carried through the streets, some peas certainly did fall out of her pocket, but they made no track, for the crafty mannequin had just before scattered peas in every street there was. And again, the princess was compelled to do servant's work until cock-crow. Next morning, the king sent his people out to seek the track, but it was all in vain. For in every street, poor children were sitting, picking up peas, and saying, "It must have rained peas last night." "We must think of something else," said the king. "Keep thy shoes on when thou goest to bed, and before thou comest back from the place where thou art taken, hide one of them there. I will soon contrive to find it." The black mannequin heard this plot, and at night, when the soldier again ordered him to bring the princess, revealed it to him, and told him that he knew of no expedient to counteract this stratagem, and that if the shoe were found in the soldier's house, it would go badly with him. "Do what I bid thee," replied the soldier. And again, this third night, the princess was obliged to work like a servant. But before she went away, she hid her shoe under the bed. Next morning, the king had the entire town searched for his daughter's shoe. It was found at the soldier's, and the soldier himself, who at the entreaty of the dwarf had gone outside the gate, was soon brought back and thrown into prison. In his flight, he had forgotten the most valuable things he had, the blue light and the gold, and had only 1 ducat in his pocket. And now, loaded with chains, he was standing at the window of his dungeon when he chanced to see one of his comrades passing by. The soldier tapped at the pane of glass, and when this man came up, said to him, "Be so kind as to fetch me the small bundle I have left lying in the inn, and I will give you a ducat for doing it." His comrade ran thither and brought him what he wanted. As soon as the soldier was alone again, he lighted his pipe and summoned the black mannequin. "Have no fear," said the latter to his master. "Go wheresoever they take you, and let them do what they will. Only take the blue light with you." Next day, the soldier was tried, and though he had done nothing wicked, the judge condemned him to death. When he was led forth to die, he begged a last favor of the king. "What is it?" asked the king. "That I may smoke one more pipe on my way." "Thou mayst smoke 3, answered the king, "but do not imagine that I will spare thy life." Then the soldier pulled out his pipe and lighted it at the blue light, and as soon as a few wreaths of smoke had ascended, the mannequin was there with a small cudgel in his hand, and said, "What does my lord command?" "Strike down to earth that false judge there and his constable, and spare not the king who has treated me so ill." Then the mannequin fell on them like lightning, darting this way and that way, and whosoever was so much as touched by his cudgel fell to earth, and did not venture to stir again. The king was terrified. He threw himself on the soldier's mercy, and merely to be allowed to live at all, gave him his kingdom for his own, and the princess to wife. The Wilful Child. Once upon a time, in a quiet village where the cottages leaned close to one another, and the church bells tolled with measured sorrow, there lived a child who was willful beyond measure. From the earliest days of her speaking, she turned her head away from her mother's counsel. When she was told to obey, she rebelled. When she was urged toward kindness, she hardened her heart. No pleading, no warning, no tender embrace could bend her spirit. For the stubbornness of disobedience grew in her as thorns grow upon a wild hedge. And so it came to pass that the Lord himself took no delight in her ways. For the world he had fashioned was one of order, and the child had chosen defiance. As the years passed, not long, her health began to wither. First, it was a pallor upon her cheeks. Then came fevers that no cool cloth could soothe, pains that no gentle hand could ease. Her mother sought out doctors, both near and far, men who had herbs and powders, men who whispered prayers, and men who spoke with voices stern and learned. Yet not one of them could do the girl any good. The sickness clung to her as ivy clings to stone, At last she lay upon her bed, pale as linen, the shadow of death already stretching over her. Her mother wept, but still the child turned her eyes away, stubborn even at the threshold of eternity. Soon she breathed her last, and her soul departed, leaving her body cold and still. The villagers came together, as is the way of folk, to carry her to the churchyard. They lowered her into the narrow grave, and the earth, dark and heavy, was heaped upon her until nothing could be seen but the mound. Prayers were said, candles were burned, and the mourners went their way. Yet scarcely had the ground grown quiet when a strange and dreadful thing occurred. From beneath the soil, a pale arm forced its way upward, stretched stiff and unyielding into the air. The fingers groped toward heaven, restless and unwilling to rest. The villagers, seeing this horror, cried out and fled, for they knew no peace lies in the hand of a child who had never learned obedience. When the men returned with trembling hearts, they pushed the arm back into the grave and spread new earth upon it. But when they turned away, the arm rose once more, white against the dark soil. Again and again they pressed it down, shoveling more earth upon it, yet always it returned, as though the stubborn spirit of the girl refused even the grave's command. At last the mother herself was summoned. With heavy heart, she came to the burial place. Her face was hollow from grief, yet there was a sternness in her eyes. She took in her hand a rod, for she had borne the child in life, and must now deal with her in death. Standing over the grave, she struck the arm sharply, as one might strike away a disobedient gesture. At that moment, the hand withdrew, sinking down into the earth as though compelled by an unseen force. The soil settled still, and no limb rose again. At last, there was silence and rest in the grave, and the willful child lay bound beneath the ground, subdued not by doctors nor prayers, but by the stern hand of her mother and the justice of heaven. And so the tale is told to warn all who would turn away from love and command alike, for the willful heart finds no peace, not in life nor in death, until it is humbled. The Seven Swabians. Long ago there lived 7 Swabians who, though simple in wit, were great in ambition. The first was Master Schultz, stout and self-important. The second was Jackley, quick with words but slow in courage. The third was Marley, fond of boasting. The fourth was Jergly, suspicious of everything. The fifth was Michal, a gloomy fellow. The sixth was Hans, who always had a rhyme ready on his tongue. And the seventh and youngest was Veitli, lively and restless. Together, they resolved to leave their homes and wander across the wide world, seeking out bold adventures and performing deeds so mighty that their names would never be forgotten. Because they wished to appear strong and well-armed, they agreed not to carry 7 separate weapons, but rather to have one great spear forged for them. A spear so very long and heavy that all 7 must hold it at once when they marched. Master Schultz walked proudly in front, grasping the foremost end, while each man held on behind in single file, with Waitley bringing up the rear. Thus, they strutted along the highways as if they were an army, though in truth, they were only 7 rather foolish peasants. One hot evening in midsummer, when the hay had been cut and the meadows lay golden and fragrant, they were still far from the village where they had hoped to sleep. The dusk was creeping over the fields when, from behind a bush, there came a furious buzzing. A great beetle, or perhaps a hornet, darted past them, its wings whirring loudly in the still air. Master Schultz, who led the spear, stopped short. Cold sweat broke out upon his brow, and his knees trembled. "Hark! Hark!" he cried, pale as chalk. "Good heavens, I hear a war drum beating." Jackley, who followed, sniffed the air and said solemnly, "Something dreadful is happening, for I smell powder and burnt matches." At this, Master Schultz could bear no more. He dropped the spear and leapt headlong over a hedge. But fate was against him, for he came down upon the teeth of a rake left behind by the mowers. The handle flew up and struck him a mighty blow on the forehead, so that sparks flashed before his eyes. "Oh dear, oh dear," he wailed. "Take me prisoner. I surrender. I yield without resistance." The other 6, seeing him fall, scrambled after, piling over the hedge one upon the other, and shouted in chorus, "If you surrender, then I surrender too. We all surrender together." But when no foe came forth to bind them, they perceived at last that they had been frightened by nothing more than a harmless insect. Fearing mockery if the tale became known, they swore a solemn oath never to speak of it again, unless one of them happened to let it slip by chance. Then, somewhat ashamed, they took up their long spear once more and continued on their way. Not many days later, a second danger befell them, even greater in their imagination than the first. Their road led through a fallow field where, basking in the warm sun, a hare sat quite still. Its long ears stood up like lances, and its glassy eyes stared unblinking at the strangers. The 7 Swabians halted in terror. "Friends," whispered Jergly, "a hideous monster waits for us. If we turn and run, it will chase and devour us whole. Then we must face the struggle, said Michal gloomily. Boldly ventured is half won. So all seven gripped the spear, Master Schultz trembling at the front and Veitli urging from behind. Veitli, feeling very brave now that 6 men stood before him, cried out, "Strike home, in every Swabian's name, or else I wish ye may be lame." Hans mocked him with a rhyme of his own. "Thunder and lightning, fine words to prate, but for dragon hunting, thou comest too late." Michal muttered darkly, "Nothing is wanting, not even a hair. Be sure the devil himself is there." Then Yergli added, "If it be not, then mark my word, it's at least his mother, or his stepbrother." Marley, thinking himself clever, whispered to Veitli, "Advance, Veitli, advance, advance, and I behind will hold the lance." But Jackli protested, "No, no, Master Schultz must lead. He alone deserves that honor." Master Schultz, though quaking in every limb, drew himself up with dignity. "Then let us march boldly against the beast and prove our valor to the world." He crossed himself, prayed quickly for God's aid, and stepped forward. But as he approached nearer to the dreadful creature, his courage failed, and he howled in despair, "Oh ho, oh ho, ho ho, ho." His cries startled the hare, which sprang up in alarm and darted away across the field as fast as lightning. "Quick, Veitli, quick!" shouted Master Schultz in relief. Look there, the monster is nothing but a hare." The Swabians cheered loudly, proud as if they had slain a dragon, and once more continued their journey. At length, their travels brought them to the banks of the Moselle, a quiet, deep river winding through mossy meadows and shadowy woods. In those days, few bridges spanned it, and most folk crossed by boat. But the 7 knew nothing of this. Seeing a man on the opposite shore, they called out to ask how they might pass over. The man, not understanding their dialect, cupped his ear and cried, "What? What?" which in the tongue of Travis means only, "What?" Master Schultz, however, thought he heard him say, "Wade, wade through the water." So, being at the front, he stepped boldly into the stream. The current caught him at once, and before long, he sank beneath the waves. Only his broad hat, blown by the wind, drifted to the far bank, where a frog hopped beside it and croaked, "What? What? What?" The 6 remaining Swabians heard the sound and cried joyfully, "Do you hear? Master Schultz calls to us. If he can wade across, then so can we. So, without pausing to think, they rushed all together into the water, clutching the long spear. But the river was deep and the current strong. One after another, they vanished beneath the waves, and not one ever rose again. Thus it came to pass that a single frog brought about the death of 6 men, and of the 7 Swabian comrades, none ever returned home. And so their great adventures ended, not with glory, but with folly, and their tale has been told ever since as a lesson in how fear and foolishness can make cowards of many and heroes of none. The Three Apprentices. There were once 3 young apprentices who had journeyed far from their homes to learn their crafts. They had sworn a solemn promise that wherever they wandered, they would remain together, share their bread, and seek work in the same towns. For a time, this vow kept them fed and clothed. Yet fortune, which often changes her face, turned against them. Their masters had no tasks left for them, and the lads found themselves ragged and hungry, with empty purses and weary feet. One evening, as they sat by the roadside in deep despair, one of them said, "Brothers, what shall we do? We cannot linger here where no one needs us. Let us go onward to another town. If we fail again to find work, let us make a pact with the innkeeper there. Each shall write and tell him where he stays, so that we may keep tidings of one another, even if we part ways." His companions nodded, for the counsel seemed wise. So they set forth. Before long, they encountered a richly dressed gentleman on the road, whose cloak shimmered like silk, and whose boots shone like polished glass. He asked who they were. "We are apprentices," they answered, "wandering in search of work. Until now, we have always stayed together. But should fortune forsake us, we must separate." "There is no need for that," said the stranger, with a smile that was too sharp to be kind. "If you will do only as I command, you shall never lack gold nor employment. Nay, you shall rise above all others, become great lords, and ride in splendid carriages, with horses at your call." The first apprentice, boldest of the 3, said, "If our souls and salvation be not endangered, we will gladly hear you." "They shall not," replied the man smoothly. "I have no claim upon you." But the second, more cautious, cast his eyes downward, and there, beneath the fine garments, he spied something dreadful. One foot was shaped like a man's, the other like a horse's hoof. At once he trembled, for he knew who stood before them. The devil, seeing their fear, laughed low Be easy. I do not seek your souls. Another soul I already half possess, and I need only to fill its measure. As for you, I offer merely wealth and comfort. Thus reassured, though not without unease, they consented. The devil then laid down his bargain. The first of you must answer every question with the words, "All three of us." The second shall say, "For money," and the third shall declare, "And quite right, too." These alone you may speak, and nothing else. If you break this command, your riches shall vanish like smoke. But if you keep it faithfully, your purses shall ever brim with gold. At once, he gave them so much money that they could scarcely carry it, and told them which inn to seek when they reached the next town. When they arrived, the innkeeper came bustling out and asked, "Do you gentlemen desire food?" "All three of us," replied the first. "Yes, yes," said the host. "That is understood." "For money," added the second. "Of course," said the host, eyeing their fine clothes. "And quite right, too," said the third. "Indeed, quite right," chuckled the innkeeper. And soon he brought them meat and wine of the best kind. After the feast, the reckoning was brought. The host handed the bill to the first apprentice. He said, "All three of us." The second said, "For money." The third chimed, "And quite right, too." "Exactly so," laughed the host. "All three pay, and without money, I can give nothing." But to his amazement, they paid more than he asked. The other lodgers whispered, "These fellows are mad." "Yes," agreed the host, shaking his head. "They are not overwise." For many days, the apprentices dwelt in the inn, speaking nothing save those three phrases. Yet, though they spoke little, they saw and understood all that happened around them. One evening, a wealthy merchant arrived with a heavy chest of gold. He said to the innkeeper, "Take care of my money, I beg you. There are three strange fellows here, and I fear they might rob me." The innkeeper promised to guard it, but when he carried the chest upstairs, he felt the weight of the treasure, and greed awoke in him. He gave the merchant a fine room above, while the apprentices lodged below. At midnight, when all seemed quiet, the innkeeper and his wife crept into the merchant's chamber with an axe. There they struck him dead and returned to bed as though nothing had happened. At dawn, the house was filled with uproar. The merchant lay slain in a pool of blood. All the guests came running. The innkeeper cried, "The three mad apprentices have done this wicked deed." The lodgers, who had always thought them strange, agreed. It can be no one else. So the apprentices were summoned. The host demanded, "Did you kill the merchant?" "All three of us," said the first. "For money," said the second. "And quite right, too," said the third. "There," shouted the host, "you hear them confess with their own mouths." They were seized, bound, and thrown into prison to await judgment. That night, as they trembled in their chains, the devil appeared to them. "Have courage," he said. "Bear it one day more. Not a hair on your heads shall be harmed if you remain faithful." Next morning, they were brought before the judge. "Are you the murderers?" he asked sternly. "All three of us." "Why did you slay the merchant?" "For money." "You wretches," thundered the judge. "Have you no shame for such sin?" "And quite right, too," answered the third. "They confess, and they show no repentance," declared the judge. "Lead them out to die." So they were led into the marketplace, where the headsman waited with his naked sword. The innkeeper himself walked among the crowd, eager to see them perish. But just as the apprentices were about to mount the scaffold, a great coach thundered into the square, drawn by 4 fiery chestnut horses. Sparks leapt from the stones beneath their hooves. From the window waved a white handkerchief. "Pardon! Pardon!" cried voices from within. The headsman stayed his hand, saying, "A pardon has come." Out stepped the nobleman, yet it was none other than the devil himself, clad like a prince. He said, "These 3 are innocent. Speak now, and reveal what you have witnessed." Then the eldest apprentice raised his hand and pointed. "We did not kill the merchant. The murderer stands there in the circle. It is the innkeeper. If you seek proof, descend into his cellar. There hang many more whom he has slain." The judge sent men to search. They returned pale and trembling, for they had found the bodies indeed, hidden away in the dark. At once the innkeeper was seized, and justice was done upon him. His head fell by the sword. Then the devil said to the 3, "Now I have taken the soul I sought. You are free, and gold shall never fail you all your days." So the apprentices lived out their years in wealth and safety, and their strange bargain was remembered wherever the tale was told. The king's son, who feared nothing. There was once a king's son, who, being young and restless, grew weary of the stillness of his father's halls. Though his home was rich in splendor, and his parents loved him dearly, he longed for the wide and wandering road. His heart, bold and fearless, whispered to him, "Go forth into the vast world. Time shall not weigh heavily upon thee, and marvels enough shall meet thine eyes." So he bade farewell to his father and mother, and set out. From dawn until dusk he went onward, caring little which path he trod, for all ways seemed alike to him. Sometimes he wandered through valleys where streams shone like silver, sometimes across desolate heaths where no bird sang, and sometimes into dark forests where the trees whispered together. At length, weary and faint, he came to the dwelling of a giant. Before the heavy door, he sat himself down to rest, and as he gazed about him, his eyes fell upon the giant's playthings. They were no common toys, 2 monstrous balls, each so great that 10 men could scarce have lifted one, and 9 pins as tall as living men. A fancy seized the king's son to set up the pins and roll the mighty balls against them. And when they clattered down with a thunderous crash, he shouted for joy, laughing and calling as children do when they play. The giant, hearing the tumult, thrust his enormous head from the window. He beheld, to his amazement, a stripling no taller than other men, yet tossing his ponderous toys as though they were no heavier than nutshells. "Worm of clay," thundered the giant, "who hath given thee such strength that thou darest trifle with my playthings?" The prince looked up at him without fear and answered, "Thou great oaf, dost thou think thine arms alone are strong? I too can do whatsoever I will." The giant, astonished, came down and watched while the youth bowled. Admiration kindled in his heart. And at last he said, "Child of man, if thou art of such mettle, then bring me an apple from the tree of life." "What wouldst thou with it?" asked the prince. "I seek it not for myself," said the giant, "but for a betrothed bride who will have no gift but this. I have roamed far and wide, yet never found the tree." "I shall soon find it," said the prince. "I know not what could hinder me from plucking the fruit." The giant shook his shaggy head. "Thinkest thou it so easy? The garden is girded with iron rails, and before them lie wild beasts side by side, keeping guard so that no mortal man may pass. Even if thou enterest the garden and findest the fruit, it is not thine, for before each apple hangs a ring, and whoso would pluck it must thrust his hand through the ring. Yet never has it closed, save to crush the hand that dared it." The king's son smiled. "That good fortune shall be mine." Then he turned his back upon the giant and journeyed onward, across mountains and plains, through forests thick and valleys green, until he reached, at last, the wondrous garden. There lay the beasts, grim wardens of the gate, but their heads were bowed and their eyes fast sealed in slumber. They stirred not as he stepped lightly over them, climbed the iron fence, and came within. In the very heart of the garden rose the tree of life, its boughs heavy with apples that glowed red as rubies. He climbed the trunk, reached forth his hand, and slipped it through the ring. To his amazement, it closed not to crush, but clasped his arm, and strength beyond measure flowed into his limbs. He plucked the apple, came down, and strode to the gate. With one grasp and a single shake, the mighty doors flew open with a crash that echoed through the garden. At the noise, the lion that had lain before the gate awoke and sprang after him, not to rend in fury, but humbly to follow as a servant follows his lord. The prince brought the apple to the giant, saying, "Lo, I have gained it without trouble." The giant rejoiced, bore it to his bride, and laid it before her. She was fair and wise, and she said, "Thou hast not won this fruit, unless thou hast also the ring upon thine arm." The giant, seeing he had not, muttered, "That is easily fetched." He hastened back and demanded it of the prince, but the king's son refused. "Where the apple is, there the ring must be also," said the giant. "Yield it or fight for it." They wrestled long and fiercely. Yet though the giant was mighty, he could not master the youth, for the ring lent him the strength of 10 men. Then the giant devised a cunning trick. "Let us cool ourselves in the river before we wrestle again," said he, "for I am heated, and so art thou." The prince, who knew not guile, agreed. He drew off his garments, and with them the ring, and leapt into the stream. At once the giant snatched the ring and fled. But the faithful lion, who had marked the theft, pursued him, sprang upon him, and tore the ring from his grasp. Panting, it laid the treasure at its master's feet. Enraged, the giant lurked behind an oak. When the prince had climbed out and bent to don his clothes, the giant rushed forth and thrust his fingers into the young man's eyes, blinding him. The poor prince groped in darkness, helpless. Then the giant took him by the hand, as though to lead him, and guided him to a high cliff, thinking, "A few steps more, and he shall fall, and the ring will be mine." But the lion seized its master by the garments and drew him back. Twice the giant tried his treachery, and twice the lion thwarted him. At last, in wrath, the giant let the youth's hand fall and turned away. The lion sprang upon him, hurled him from the cliff, and dashed him to pieces upon the stones below. The faithful beast then guided its master to a tree where a clear brook ran. The prince sat down, and the lion sprinkled his face with water. Scarcely had a few drops touched the empty sockets when he dimly saw again. And lo, a bird flew against the tree and hurt itself, then bathed in the brook, and rose with bright eyes, its sight renewed. The prince understood the sign. He bent and washed his face in the stream. And when he lifted his head, his eyes were whole, and his sight keener than ever. He thanked God for his mercy, and with the lion at his side, he journeyed on. Now it befell that he came before a great castle, enchanted and gloomy. At the gate stood a maiden, fair of form but black as coal. She cried, "Deliver me, noble youth, from the spell that binds me." "What must I do?" asked the prince. "Pass 3 nights in the hall of yonder castle," said she. "Fear nothing, though spirits torment thee sorely. Utter no cry, and I shall be freed. They dare not take thy life." "I fear nothing," said the prince, "with God's help." So he entered the hall. At midnight, there arose a dreadful clamor. Little devils swarmed forth, lit a fire, and gamboled, screaming that one among them was an intruder. They dragged him, beat him, and tormented him cruelly. Yet he uttered no sound. At dawn, the maiden came with water of life, washed him, and his strength returned. Her feet were already white. The second night, the torment was harsher still, and his body covered with wounds. Yet he bore all silently, and in the morning she healed him. Now her hands were white as well. On the third night, the fiends shrieked, "Art thou here still? Thou shalt not leave alive." They pulled and tore him till he thought his limbs would part, yet no cry passed his lips. At dawn he lay senseless, but the maiden sprinkled him, and he awoke, whole and strong. She stood beside him, white and radiant as the morning. "Now swing thy sword thrice upon the stair," said she, "and the spell is broken." He did so, and at once the castle was freed from enchantment. The maiden shone in royal splendor, for she was a king's daughter. Servants thronged the hall, and tables were laid with feast and wine. That very evening, the wedding was held with joy and rejoicing, and the prince sat with his bride, the faithful lion at his feet, while music and gladness filled the halls. Donkey, Cabbages. There was once a young huntsman who went into the forest to lie in wait. He had a fresh and joyous heart, and as he was going thither, whistling upon a leaf, an ugly old crone came up, who spoke to him and said, "Good day, dear huntsman. Truly you are merry and contented, but I am suffering from hunger and thirst. Do give me an alms." The huntsman had compassion on the poor old creature, felt in his pocket, and gave her what he could afford. He was then about to go further, but the old woman stopped him and said, "Listen, dear huntsman, to what I tell you. I will make you a present in return for your kindness. Go on your way now, but in a little while you will come to a tree whereon 9 birds are sitting, which have a cloak in their claws and are plucking at it. Take your gun and shoot into the midst of them. They will let the cloak fall down to you, but one of the birds will be hurt and will drop down dead. Carry away the cloak. It is a wishing cloak. When you throw it over your shoulders, you only have to wish to be in a certain place, and you will be there in the twinkling of an eye. Take out the heart of the dead bird and swallow it whole, and every morning early when you get up, you will find a gold piece under your pillow." The huntsman thanked the wise woman and thought to himself, "Those are fine things that she has promised me, if all does but come true." And verily, when he had walked about 100 paces, he heard in the branches above him such a screaming and twittering that he looked up and saw there a crowd of birds who were tearing a piece of cloth about with their beaks and claws, and tugging and fighting, as if each wanted to have it all to himself. "Well," said the huntsman, "this is wonderful. It has really come to pass just as the old wife foretold." And he took the gun from his shoulder, aimed and fired right into the midst of them, so that the feathers flew about. The birds instantly took to flight with loud outcries, but one dropped down dead, and the cloak fell at the same time. Then the huntsman did as the old woman had directed him, cut open the bird, sought the heart, swallowed it down, and took the cloak home with him. Next morning, when he awoke, the promise occurred to him, and he wished to see if it also had been fulfilled. When he lifted up the pillow, the gold piece shone in his eyes, and next day he found another. And so it went on, every time he got up. He gathered together a heap of gold, but at last he thought, "Of what use is all my gold to me if I stay at home? I will go forth and see the world." He then took leave of his parents, buckled on his huntsman's pouch and gun, and went out into the world. It came to pass that one day he traveled through a dense forest, and when he came to the end of it, in the plain before him stood a fine castle. An old woman was standing with a wonderfully beautiful maiden, looking out of one of the windows. The old woman, however, was a witch, and said to the maiden, "There comes one out of the forest who has a wonderful treasure in his body. We must filch it from him, my dear daughter. It is more suitable for us than for him. He has a bird's heart about him, by means of which a gold piece lies every morning under his pillow." She told her what she was to do to get it. and what part she had to play, and finally threatened her, and said with angry eyes, "And if you do not attend to what I say, it will be the worse for you." Now when the huntsman came nearer, he descried the maiden, and said to himself, "I have traveled about for such a long time. I will take a rest for once, and enter that beautiful castle. I have certainly money enough." Nevertheless, the real reason was that he had caught sight of the pretty girl. He entered the house and was well received and courteously entertained. Before long, he was so much in love with the young witch that he no longer thought of anything else, and only saw things as she saw them, and did what she desired. The old woman then said, "Now we must have the bird's heart. He will never miss it." She prepared a drink, and when it was ready, poured it into a cup and gave it to the maiden, who was to present it to the huntsman. She did so, saying, "Now, my dearest, drink to me." So he took the cup, and when he had swallowed the draught, he brought up the heart of the bird. The girl had to take it away secretly and swallow it herself, for the old woman would have it so. Thenceforward, he found no more gold under his pillow, but it lay instead under that of the maiden, from whence the old woman fetched it away every morning. But he was so much in love and so befooled that he thought of nothing else but of passing his time with the girl. Then the old witch said, "We have the bird's heart, but we must also take the wishing cloak away from him." The girl answered, "We will leave him that. He has lost his wealth." The old woman was angry and said, "Such a mantle is a wonderful thing, and is seldom to be found in this world. I must and will have it." She gave the girl several blows, and said that if she did not obey, it should fare ill with her. So she did the old woman's bidding, placed herself at the window, and looked on the distant country, as if she were very sorrowful. The huntsman asked, "Why dost thou stand there so sorrowfully?" "Ah, my beloved," was her answer, "over yonder lies the garnet mountain, where the precious stones grow. I long for them so much that when I think of them, I feel quite sad. But who can get them? Only the birds. They fly and can reach them, but a man never. Hast thou nothing else to complain of?" said the huntsman. "I will soon remove that burden from thy heart." With that, he drew her under his mantle, wished himself on the garnet mountain, and in the twinkling of an eye, they were sitting on it together. Precious stones were glistening on every side, so that it was a joy to see them, and together they gathered the finest and costliest of them. Now, the old woman had, through her sorceries, contrived that the eyes of the huntsman should become heavy. He said to the maiden, "We will sit down and rest a while. I am so tired that I can no longer stand on my feet." Then they sat down, and he laid his head in her lap and fell asleep. When he was asleep, she unfastened the mantle from his shoulders and wrapped herself in it, picked up the garnets and stones, and wished herself back at home with them. But when the huntsman had had his sleep out and awoke, and perceived that his sweetheart had betrayed him, and left him alone on the wild mountain, he said, "Oh, what treachery there is in the world," and sat down there in care and sorrow, not knowing what to do. But the mountain belonged to some wild and monstrous giants who dwelt thereon and lived their lives there, and he had not sat long before he saw 3 of them coming towards him. So he lay down as if he were sunk in a deep sleep. Then the giants came up, and the first kicked him with his foot and said, "What sort of an earthworm is lying curled up here?" The second said, "Step upon him and kill him." But the third said, "That would indeed be worth your while. Just let him live. He cannot remain here. And when he climbs higher, toward the summit of the mountain, the clouds will lay hold of him and bear him away." So saying, they passed by. But the huntsman had paid heed to their words, and as soon as they were gone, he rose and climbed up to the summit of the mountain. And when he had sat there a while, a cloud floated towards him, caught him up, carried him away, and traveled about for a long time in the heavens. Then it sank lower and let itself down on a great cabbage garden, girt round by walls, so that he came softly to the ground on cabbages and vegetables. Then the huntsman looked about him and said, "If I had but something to eat. I am so hungry, and my hunger will increase in course of time. But I see here neither apples nor pears, nor any other sort of fruit. Everywhere nothing but cabbages." But at length he thought, "At a pinch I can eat some of the leaves. They do not taste particularly good, but they will refresh me." With that, he picked himself out a fine head of cabbage and ate it. But scarcely had he swallowed a couple of mouthfuls than he felt very strange and quite different. 4 legs grew on him, a large head and 2 thick ears, and he saw with horror that he was changed into an ass. Still, as his hunger increased every minute, and as the juicy leaves were suitable to his present nature, he went on eating with great zest. At last, he arrived at a different kind of cabbage, but as soon as he had swallowed it, he again felt a change and reassumed his former human shape. Then the huntsman lay down and slept off his fatigue. When he awoke next morning, he broke off one head of the bad cabbages and another of the good ones, and thought to himself, "This shall help me to get my own again, and punish treachery." Then he took the cabbages with him, climbed over the wall, and went forth to seek for the castle of his sweetheart. After wandering about for a couple of days, he was lucky enough to find it again. He dyed his face brown so that his own mother would not have known him, and begged for shelter. "I am so tired," said he, "that I can go no further." The witch asked, "Who are you, countryman, and what is your business?" "I am a king's messenger, and was sent out to seek the most delicious salad which grows beneath the sun. I have even been so fortunate as to find it, and am carrying it about with me. But the heat of the sun is so intense that the delicate cabbage threatens to wither, and I do not know if I can carry it any further." When the old woman heard of the exquisite salad, she was greedy, and said, "Dear countryman, let me just taste this wonderful salad." "Why not?" answered he. "I have brought 2 heads with me, and will give you one of them." And he opened his pouch and handed her the bad cabbage. The witch suspected nothing amiss, and her mouth watered so for this new dish that she herself went into the kitchen and dressed it. When it was prepared, she could not wait until it was set on the table, but took a couple of leaves at once and put them in her mouth. But hardly had she swallowed them than she was deprived of her human shape, and she ran out into the courtyard in the form of an ass. Presently, the maid-servant entered the kitchen, saw the salad standing there, ready prepared, and was about to carry it up. But on the way, according to habit, she was seized by the desire to taste, and she ate a couple of leaves. Instantly, the magic power showed itself, and she likewise became an ass and ran out to the old woman, and the dish of salad fell to the ground. Meantime, the messenger sat beside the beautiful girl, and as no one came with the salad, and she also was longing for it, she said, "I don't know what has become of the salad." The huntsman thought, "The salad must have already taken effect," and said, "I will go to the kitchen and inquire about it." As he went down, he saw the 2 asses running about in the courtyard. The salad, however, was lying on the ground. "All right," said he, "the 2 have taken their portion." And he picked up the other leaves, laid them on the dish, and carried them to the maiden. "I bring you the delicate food myself," said he, "in order that you may not have to wait longer." Then she ate of it, and was, like the others, immediately deprived of her human form, and ran out into the courtyard in the shape of an ass. After the huntsman had washed his face so that the transformed ones could recognize him, he went down into the courtyard and said, "Now you shall receive the wages of your treachery, and bound them together, all three with one rope, and drove them along until he came to a mill. He knocked at the window. The miller put out his head and asked what he wanted. "I have 3 unmanageable beasts," answered he, "which I don't want to keep any longer. Will you take them in and give them food and stable room, and manage them as I tell you? And then I will pay you what you ask." The miller said, "Why not? But how am I to manage them?" The huntsman then said that he was to give 3 beatings and 1 meal daily to the old donkey, and that was the witch. 1 beating and 3 meals to the younger one, which was the servant girl, and to the youngest, which was the maiden, no beatings and 3 meals, for he could not bring himself to have the maiden beaten. After that, he went back into the castle and found therein everything he needed. After a couple of days, the miller came and said he must inform him that the old ass, which had received 3 beatings and only 1 meal daily, was dead. "The 2 others," he continued, "are certainly not dead, and are fed 3 times daily, but they are so sad that they cannot last much longer." The huntsman was moved to pity, put away his anger, and told the miller to drive them back again to him. And when they came, he gave them some of the good salad, so that they became human again. The beautiful girl fell on her knees before him and said, "Ah, my beloved, forgive me for the evil I have done you. My mother drove me to it. It was done against my will, for I love you dearly. Your wishing cloak hangs in a cupboard, and as for the bird's heart, I will take a vomiting potion." But he thought otherwise, and said, "Keep it. It is all the same, for I will take thee for my true wife." So the wedding was celebrated, and they lived happily together until their death. The 3 army surgeons. 3 army surgeons, who thought they knew their art perfectly, were traveling about the world, and they came to an inn where they wanted to pass the night. The host asked whence they came and whither they were going. "We are roaming about the world and practicing our art. Just show me for once in a way what you can do," said the host. Then the first said he would cut off his hand and put it on again early next morning. The second said he would tear out his heart and replace it next morning. The third said he would cut out his eyes and heal them again next morning. "If you can do that," said the innkeeper, "you have learned everything." They, however, had a salve with which they rubbed themselves, which joined parts together, and they carried the little bottle in which it was constantly with them. Then they cut the hand, heart, and eyes from their bodies, as they had said they would, and laid them all together on a plate, and gave it to the innkeeper. The innkeeper gave it to a servant, who was to set it in the cupboard. and take good care of it. The girl, however, had a lover in secret, who was a soldier. When therefore the innkeeper, the 3 army surgeons, and everyone else in the house were asleep, the soldier came and wanted something to eat. The girl opened the cupboard and brought him some food. And in her love forgot to shut the cupboard door again. She seated herself at the table by her lover, and they chattered away together. While she sat so contentedly there, thinking of no ill luck, the cat came creeping in, found the cupboard open, took the hand and heart and eyes of the 3 army surgeons, and ran off with them. When the soldier had done eating, and the girl was taking away the things and going to shut the cupboard, she saw that the plate which the innkeeper had given her to take care of was empty. Then she said in a fright to her lover, "Ah, miserable girl, what shall I do? The hand is gone, the heart and the eyes are gone too. What will become of me in the morning?" "Be easy," said he. "I will help thee out of thy trouble. There is a thief hanging outside on the gallows. I will cut off his hand." "Which hand was it?" "The right one." Then the girl gave him a sharp knife, and he went and cut the poor sinner's right hand off and brought it to her. After this, he caught the cat and cut its eyes out. And now nothing but the heart was wanting. "Have you not been killing? And are not the dead pigs in the cellar?" said he. "Yes," said the girl. "That's well," said the soldier, and he went down and fetched a pig's heart. The girl placed all together on the plate and put it in the cupboard. And when after this her lover took leave of her, she went quietly to bed. In the morning, when the 3 army surgeons got up, they told the girl she was to bring them the plate on which the hand, heart, and eyes were lying. Then she brought it out of the cupboard, and the first fixed the thief's hand on and smeared it with his salve, and it grew to his arm directly. The second took the cat's eyes and put them in his own head. The third fixed the pig's heart firm in the place where his own had been. And the innkeeper stood by, admired their skill, and said he had never yet seen such a thing as that done, and would sing their praises and recommend them to everyone. Then they paid their bill and traveled farther. As they were on their way, the one with the pig's heart did not stay with them at all, but wherever there was a corner, he ran to it, and rooted about in it with his nose as pigs do. The others wanted to hold him back by the tail of his coat, but that did no good. He tore himself loose and ran wherever the dirt was thickest. The second also behaved very strangely. He rubbed his eyes and said to the others, "Comrades, what is the matter? I don't see at all. Will one of you lead me?" so that I do not fall." Then, with difficulty, they traveled on till evening, when they reached another inn. They went into the bar together, and there at a table in the corner sat a rich man counting money. The one with the thief's hand walked round about him, made a sudden movement twice with his arm, and at last, when the stranger turned away, he snatched at the pile of money and took a handful from it. One of them saw this and said, "Comrade, what art thou about? Thou must not steal shame on thee." "Ay," said he, "but how can I stop myself? My hand twitches, and I am forced to snatch things, whether I will or not." After this, they lay down to sleep. And while they were lying there, it was so dark that no one could see his own hand. All at once, the one with the cat's eyes awoke, aroused the others, and said, "Brothers, just look up. Do you see the white mice running about there?" The two sat up, but could see nothing. Then said he, "Things are not right with us. We have not got back again what is ours. We must return to the innkeeper. He has deceived us." They went back, therefore, the next morning, and told the host they had not got what was their own again, that the first had a thief's hand, the second cat's eyes, and the third a pig's heart. The innkeeper said that the girl must be to blame for that, and was going to call her. But when she had seen the three coming, she had run out by the back door and not come back. Then the three said he must give them a great deal of money, or they would set his house on fire. He gave them what he had, and whatever he could get together, and the three went away with it. It was enough for the rest of their lives, but they would rather have had their own proper organs.